Hey, how's it going? Frank the Skink here, coming to you live today from all parts of New Jersey. Well, actually, specifically from the beach here at Long Beach Island. At Sparnigan Bay Lighthouse behind me. So, yeah, today we're going to talk a little bit about the history of this great state that I love, the state of New Jersey. Uh, Specifically, I figured I'd talk about the Battle of Trenton because, well, everyone knows the story of Washington crossing the Delaware. It's a cold night, Christmas. He crosses. They they catch the Hessians by surprise. They cut their throats. It's a great victory. Morale is restored for the army. Great story. But that's not the end of the story. There's actually a lot more to it. It's the Battle of Trenton. The Battle of Trenton and the Battle of Princeton were probably the two greatest turning points for the war against the British in the early American Revolution. Up until this point, Washington had largely been getting his ass handed to him by the British Army. They almost completely destroyed the American forces in New York City. The British had camped out, I believe, in Staten Island, while Washington was in the Brooklyn and Bronx area. The British attacked them and sent another force around to the side, completely and utterly cutting them off. It was a bloodbath. Washington just barely managed to get across. Fog rolled in at an opportune time, and the Continental Army was basically able to slink across. It was a interesting victory, to say the least, or I should say, it was a lucky break, to say the least. After that, morale was kind of low. Most people expected that the war would soon be over and the revolution had failed. To make it worse, it was Christmas, and the enlistments for the Continental Army were coming up at the end of the year. No one believed that the soldiers would re-enlist for what was seen to be a losing battle. I mean, it's hard enough to sell war to farmers, it really is. It's even harder to sell them war when they're losing. So, faced with certain defeat, Washington gathered up his men, crossed the Delaware River in boats, somewhere around Lawrenceville, New Jersey. They crossed in a storm. It was a very bad winter storm. And they used the cover of this storm to sneak up on the Hessians, who had been enjoying their Christmas revels a bit too heavily. And they slaughtered them. Brutally slaughtered them at this outpost. And everyone knows this. Well, the following morning, around 8 in the morning, in an even worse snowstorm than the night before, Washington gathered up his men, their guns, their supplies, and they marched south in a column a mile long. And they marched all the way to Trenton, somehow managing to catch the Hessians by surprise again. A fact that actually astonished Washington. He ordered his men to charge and their artillery to fire upon the city. And it was only at this point that the Hessians started sounding the alarm, and Hessians started getting ready for battle, because prior to this, they'd been asleep, completely unaware that certain doom was falling upon them. The men were commanded by one, I believe he was lieutenant, he might have been commander. They were commanded by a man named Johann Rall, and Rall was known for being a tough but competent commander who normally would have been able to rally his troops, mount a retreat, and be able to counterattack and return fire and come back another day. That didn't happen, largely due to a failure in communication. His one of his lieutenants, one of his top advisors, had told him that the Continental Army had surrounded the city and all avenues of escape were completely cut off. There was no hope. So Roll committed his troops to battle, and so they went forth, and they attempted to outflank the Continental Army, not once, not twice, not thrice, but continuously, until they suffered such heavy casualties that they were forced to surrender. Specifically, they were forced to surrender because Johann Roll was mortally wounded in the battle. This fighting was very difficult for the Continental Army, but it was far worse for the Hessian troops. At this point, Washington now had a winter staging grounds and an eye on the British in nearby Princeton, and he was quick to pounce, as it were. This isn't really about the Battle of Princeton, but it was a victory, and Washington managed to drive the British completely out of New Jersey at that point. It is an interesting point, in fact, that at this point in time, the state of New Washington, the colony of New Jersey, actually had a loyalist governor in office, a man by the name of William Franklin. You probably know his father, Mr. Benjamin Franklin, because Benjamin was on the side of liberty and William was loyal to the crown. The two couldn't see eye to eye, and they never spoke again after the war started in 1776. It's a sad tale. And that's it. Just a short history blurb about the state I love so much. Look forward to more of these coming out in the future over the next couple of, as I see fit. There's a lot of history here in New Jersey, and I look forward to sharing it with you all. Thank you so much. This has been Frank the Skink.